The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Welcome to the Empower Hour with Greater Nashua Mental Health. The Empower Hour will provide information and support about mental health, substance use, and behavioral health. Our goal is to share inspiring stories about transforming lives, to strike down stigma, and to encourage our community to reach out and get help when needed. Mental health is part of all of our lives. It's time we talk about it. I'm Dr. Cynthia Whitaker, President and CEO of Greater Nashua Mental Health, and it's time to get empowered. Welcome to the Empower Hour with Greater Nashua Mental Health. I'm Dr. Cynthia Whitaker, the President and CEO of Greater Nashua Mental Health, and I am pleased to have with me today Gary Hooper, who's the coordinator of an important program that we have, the Supported Employment Program. Gary, I'm so excited to have you here today.
Thank you for having me.
I would love to just start with a little bit about you, how long you've worked at Greater Nashua, and what excites you about what you do.
So I started back in the 90s. For 10 years, I did what they call transitional employment. So that's basically a stepping stone to going into the main workforce, what we call competitive employment. So competitive employment is a job out in the community that anybody can apply for, pays at least minimum wage. Transitional employment, on the other hand, is more of a training program. Uh-huh. And what we did is we ran a small discount store. So folks would come in. Sometimes it's to learn new skills. Sometimes it's just to get something on their resume so that when they go out into the competitive workforce, they feel they have, a good advantage. So I was assistant manager and then manager there over the 10 years. Then I went into big box retail. And then in 2008, I came back to Greater Nashua. I heard there was an opening for a support employment specialist. I liked the sounds of the program. It was, IPS, which stands for Individual Placement and Support. IPS support employment is focused on consumer choice and strengths. So it's more, I guess it's more recovery based. So I felt that was something that I needed to do. And then, so I was an employment specialist for a few years. Been the IPS support employment coordinator for, I think, 5 years now. I'm not quite sure. Time flies when you're having fun.
It sure does. But how interesting that you got to be part of both of those different employment programs. So in the past, when we had that, you called it transitional employment.
Yeah.
And now to see the difference between supported employment, are there some really big differences, like about what supported employment now is versus what sometimes maybe people still think our program is, the transitional program, but it's not.
Right. It's very different. I mean, just from the pay perspective, with transitional employment, it was a stipend that clients got. With supported employment, it's focused on getting a regular job, because we know that people are capable of working. And not only are they capable of working, it benefits them. It helps to reduce symptoms. It helps to reduce substance use in some cases, if somebody's struggling with that. But it also, I think, more than the money, most of my clients will say it's the sense of purpose and the feeling like they're contributing to the community.
I mean, that makes sense to me. I mean, I know that, just speaking for myself, you get a lot of satisfaction, or, you feel good. Oh, I got accomplished this. I went to work and did this for somebody or made something better. So that makes sense to me.
Yeah, definitely. They're learning, either they're developing and using the skills they have, or they're learning new skills. So I mentioned that it's strength-based and personal choice.
Yeah, what do those mean?
So we don't just put people in jobs. We help people get into jobs that they want to do. Because, I mean, I'm sure you, as well as everybody else, has had a job that they didn't end up liking once they got in there. And then you're out looking again. So we want to get people into jobs that they're going to enjoy.
So that's what you mean by the client choice. So
Client
it's not
choice,
like
yes.
we have a connection to this employer and there's an opening and we put anybody in it. We make sure it's really about what the client wants.
It's a match for both the employer and the client. So the other thing that we're big on with client choice is what we call disclosure. So disclosure is whether or not the client wants the employer to know that they're involved with our program. They can get our services, they can get our support without us actually talking to the employer, without the employer knowing they're in the program. We're kind of behind the scenes. We'll meet with them once they're working. We'll meet with them after work or on a break or before work. And I feel that that's probably more important in a lot of cases than finding the job.
Meeting the support while they're working or while they're transitioning?
Yeah, maintaining employment. So I've had a number of clients that had no problem finding jobs, but they would go from job to job to job. So it was helping them figure out where their strengths were, where their interests really lied, and then supporting them to overcome any barriers that might come up while they're employed. So that might be helping with socialization, communication, communicating with their supervisor. A lot of our folks get anxious when they get into a situation, and so helping them to figure out how to work through that and be successful. That's our primary goal.
Yeah, so I think there's definitely a lot more to supported employment than people think, because I do think a lot of people think of it as either the old, like, transitional, we teach you how to have a job, or we help you find a job. But there's a lot more to it.
There is.
Yeah.
And actually, we also do a lot with education, because somebody may have a career goal.
Oh, right.
So if they might be working and going to school. But the program has evolved where we're doing a lot more with helping people with getting into, getting their GED or getting into college.
So getting the education they might need for the next step, or to get a job to
exactly.
begin with.
Or certificates. We've had people get certificates in soldering, computer certificates, to be a tech, stuff that's beyond me.
Wow. So it's interesting for me to hear you talk about it in that kind of that varied way. So what does it look like, kind of like a day in the life of a supported employment specialist? Like what What did you do? Were the staff that you supervise now do a lot of what do you do during the day? Because there sounds like there's a lot of different things.
We're out in the community a lot. We do meet with employers. So we're trying to build relationships with employers. For those clients that wish to disclose, we're working with the employer. For example, I had a client this week who had gotten a job a couple weeks ago, and because of physical issue had to stop working, and we worked with the employer to keep that job, and now he's back to work.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so we do a lot of different things with the clients. We develop resumes, cover letters, work on applications. A lot of those are online, and some of our folks, especially older folks, the younger ones are pretty computer savvy, but some folks are a little uncomfortable with the computer, so we help with those because so many places apply online now. They also do what they call assessment tests. So those are basically a bunch of odd random questions that I guess determine what kind of a worker you are and what kind of a person you are. So we'll go through and help them with that to understand the questions, what's being asked of them.
So what I'm kind of hearing from you is that some of your tasks are pre-employment, getting somebody ready, helping with the resume. Then there's kind of the actual application helping process.
Yeah. And then we go into interviewing skills. We might do mock interviews with them.
Okay.
Some role play to get them prepared. If they don't want us, if they don't want to disclose, they don't want us meeting with the employer, then we try to get them prepared for that. And that might include setting up a mock interview with somebody else in the agency. My past supervisor, Jill O'Neill, used to do mock interviews for my clients quite often.
So that they would practice with somebody they didn't know.
Exactly.
Rather than practice with you, who they might know. Yeah.
Yeah, where they feel comfortable. So I think that helps.
And then you already mentioned, and then once somebody's in a job, you're checking in with them and
yeah. So
sure.
One of the principles of supported employment is time unlimited. So that basically means that we don't stop seeing somebody because they've run out of time.
So you support someone as long as they need.
We support somebody as long as they want the support. Usually they'll get to a point where they're comfortable enough in their job and their support comes from the rest of the clinical team. And supported employment will back off and we'll discontinue the service. But if something comes up and they need supported employment again, or maybe they want to change jobs, maybe an issue came up and they've decided they want to disclose and they want somebody to go in and advocate for them, we'll add supported employment back in.
So that sounds like it's not a one and done. It's not like, oh, you've got your job, we're out of here, and you can't come back. If somebody needs it again, it's there. And if it's time unlimited, it must be hard to say, like, what's an average time somebody's in the program, or?
So I think once somebody's working, probably the average is 6 to 9 months
after they start working.
We've had folks that are in the program for just a few months. They're successful, they're comfortable, and we, support employment services end, but they're always available. And then we have folks that have been with us for several years that, really struggle, whether it's getting the job or maintaining the job.
So it's really about the client choice. If a person wants to work, your team's willing to come and support them in figuring out the best fit, the skills they need to get there.
Yeah. And we also work very closely with the clinical team. So the case managers, the therapists, the doctors. You know, one of the things that therapists do with clients is to help them with coping skills.
Right.
So things that help them manage their anxiety, for example. So we will work on those things that to reinforce what the therapist is teaching them.
So the supported employment clients that are in our service at Greater Nashua, are they all clients of Greater Nashua?
They are. So in order to be in supported employment, someone needs to be a client. So having a severe mental illness, and then that's it. That and a desire to work.
So there's no exclusionary criteria.
Exactly.
It's just if you're a client and you want to work, supported employment.
Yeah,
is there to
regardless
support.
of severity of symptoms, substance use,
Age.
No, we work with 16 and up. We have quite a few clients in our older adult services.
So individuals over 60.
Yeah.
Yep.
We just recently hired an employment specialist for our deaf and hard of hearing services, which, as you know, is statewide.
Yep.
She's already got 9 clients working on number 10.
Excellent.
So, yeah, very exciting.
Yeah, that is kind of exciting. And you mentioned that some clients choose to disclose that they have your support and some choose not to. Is it like a half and half? Is it a sometimes I don't, but then I do? Like
It varies a lot. I can't say I could put a percentage on it, but we do get a lot of folks that kind of back and forth with disclosure.
and maybe it depends on what kind of field or what kind of job they're going into too, I would think.
Yeah, because let's face it, you have somebody, a third person coming into an interview with you, and you're trying to make a good impression. So there's the stigma,
Yeah.
and that's the downside of disclosure. We have a lot of employers that we work with that, maybe had a family member or a friend that had mental illness, and they want to help. They want to give people a chance.
So you have a specific task that your supported employment specialists do called job development.
Yes.
What does that mean?
So job development is building those relationships with the employers. So we're out there multiple times a week, meeting with different employers. So there are 2 types of job development. There's general job development. We're just out there introducing the program and ourselves and, kind of letting the employers know what we do and what we don't do. Because we don't go in and job coach.
Right.
And we don't, I can't think of the word now, but we want them to know about the program. So the other thing is what we call client-specific job development, which is what we mostly do. And that's for the clients that are disclosing.
That have said they want a certain type of job, and so then you're trying to find those.
Right, exactly.
employers.
We're trying to make that connection with the right job. So one of the things we do when we're doing pre-employment is sometimes looking to help somebody figure out what type of job or what business might be a good fit for them based on their interests, their skills. And like I said, if education is needed, we do that first. And then when the education is done, we help them find the job.
How do employers react during the job development? Like, do you explain to them some of the benefits of hiring somebody that you're involved? Or, how do employers usually react?
So it's a wide range.
I bet.
I can't say I haven't had, people be very blunt and not very nice. But I would say the majority of employers are very welcoming, very understanding, very willing to give people an opportunity. Right now, employers are having a hard time finding employees.
Right.
So, which benefits us.
Right. I would think if you were an employer having trouble finding employees and you felt like maybe you were quote unquote taking a risk, better to take a risk with an employee who has support behind them than maybe somebody that doesn't.
Right, because you don't know anything about an employee or potential employee.
Right.
So yeah, knowing they have that support. There are also tax incentives for hiring people with disabilities.
So there is incentive programs for employers as well.
Yeah, and the big companies know about that, and they take full advantage of that. It's the smaller companies. It's they're leery of the paperwork involved and that kind of thing. So we're working to better develop our skills to help the smaller employers with that type of thing.
Yeah, I could imagine that it must be interesting conversations to have with employers that aren't maybe used to having people come in and talk about this.
Yeah, and they often think that they have to pay us. And so they're a little surprised when, there are no fees involved for them.
Right. Right. You're there simply to help make a match and have the person who we're supporting be as successful as they can be.
Exactly.
Yeah, interesting. You must have tons of success stories.
We do.
Yeah.
I mentioned before about, some people have been in the program a few years. We have one individual who has worked with several employment specialists, myself included, in the past, and just has really struggled with getting a job because he has no work history. One of our newer employment specialists, Rachel, does a phenomenal job at job development and getting people into jobs that they enjoy. And he's been working for 4 months now with her help. So after years of trying, now he has a car, he's doing, things are looking up. He's feeling, good.
I mean, what you just said there just makes me think of how important work can be just as for a person's whole health. Like, okay, now I have a car, so now I have transportation. I can be more independent. I can make my other appointments more easily. I can take care of myself better. I mean, just kind of a cascade of positive.
I think a lot of us take it, I don't know if you would say take advantage, not take advantage.
Take for granted.
Take for granted, thank you.
Yeah.
Having a car, having transportation. I have one client, part of the FEP program, which is first episode psychosis.
Yep.
Sorry. She has come so far since she started working several months ago, but still struggles with the bus. So one of the things I do is I ride the bus with her.
Nice.
We meet at her work at the end of her day. We get on the bus. She is trying to learn which buses to get on and that kind of thing, because she gets anxious, she gets confused as to where she should be.
What a great example of something that's very practical, but really important to maintaining the job.
Oh,
Right?
definitely.
So if the way of getting there and getting home causes me a lot of anxiety and I'm not clear on it, I might not want to keep my job, but my supported employment specialist comes, teaches me, helps me
yeah,
to become more independent in that. What a great example.
It is. And we work a lot with families as well.
Mm-hmm.
This particular client, she has a younger brother who sometimes rides the bus with her when I'm not able to.
Mm-hmm.
You know, her mother and father are very supportive. You know, we see that a lot with families. Some families, especially if somebody's on benefits like Social Security, are leery about their son or daughter getting a job and losing those benefits. So one of the things that the state has done is there's been funding made for a certified work incentives counselor. Basically what they do is they look at how the income from work is going to affect the different benefits that somebody gets. So, and that's not just Social Security, that's also health insurance, Medicaid, Medicare.
And so this person, this certified work
ince-
incentive counselor, is
Yep.
now embedded in your team?
Yes. Yeah, she's fairly new too. Hired her shortly after we hired the person for deaf and hard of hearing services. She's settling in and learning the ropes. She has a lot of trainings to go through. Social Security basically requires 3 months of trainings, but she's, you know, getting into that. And in the meantime, she's building relationships with Social Security, Vocational Rehabilitation, DHHS, Department of Health and Human Services.
Sounds like a great extension of your program, because I'm sure all this time you've had a lot of people, like you said, parents or families or clients themselves worried about losing their benefits. And I'm
Yeah,
sure
I
you've
think-
had that conversation.
I think it's one of the biggest fears.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And so nice that you know, the state's now kind of providing us the funds to support a person really learning and becoming certified in that area.
Yes. Yeah. Definitely. I think it's going to make a huge difference.
So you said it's one of the biggest fears that people have is about their benefits changing or things shifting.
Yeah.
So what would you typically say to somebody that has that fear? I mean, because my guess is you're still finding people jobs, so maybe that fear isn't always true or founded.
Right. And like I said before, people aren't always about the money. Mm-hmm. It's more about feeling productive.
Yeah.
Or feeling, you know, like they're giving back to the community, that kind of thing, self-worth. Mm-hmm. But they always make more when they're working than when they're just on benefits. So depending on the types of benefits they have, they may or may not lose some benefits. But depending on how much they work, you know, whether it's part-time or full-time, how many hours, how much per hour, we have to figure all that stuff out ahead of time so that they can make an informed decision.
So again, it's client choice. So some people might choose because maybe they have gotten a certification in soldering, like somebody you mentioned,
Yep.
or that they're going to ultimately come off the benefits because they're going to be able to work
Oh,
and
definitely.
have a job. And somebody else might be really leery because they have maybe so much symptoms and a history of on and off again work that they're reluctant to not have the consistency of benefits in case they can't maintain work. So you have that conversation with clients. And
Yeah, very, very much so. There are worksheets that Social Security has available to figure out how some of those benefits might get affected. There's programs like what they call MEAD, Medicaid for Employed Adults with Disabilities.
so people can continue to work.
So they
and
can
have
continue to work and
benefits.
have their insurance, and it actually allows them to make being on the MEAD program allows them to make more money and not get penalized.
So there's a lot of different programs out there, so you really just work with people around figuring out what's the best match for
Yeah,
them.
and I think that's where the Certified Work Incentives Counselor is going to really come in as being vital.
Yeah, and just having a better understanding of it all.
Yeah.
It sounds like a lot because you've got
It-
Social
it-
Security
and things
benefits, health
change.
benefits, all food stamps, all kinds of different things that
Yeah,
can
and
be
it all
impacted.
changes all the time.
Yeah. Interesting. So if you've worked here in the past, the previous program and this program, all together, you were telling me like 23 years or
Yeah, it'll be 24 in February, end
24
of February.
in February. Wow. So do you have like moments that really like stick out to you as like, oh, I'll never forget that day or those moments?
From both programs.
Yeah.
You know, the grand opening of the store. You know, seeing. I think the biggest moments are seeing the successes and seeing people moving on. When it was transitional employment, they moved on to jobs out in the community. You know, and I see them even now. I see people that I worked with back then,
Oh,
and it's so good to see them
that
and
must be like
see how they're doing.
heartwarming.
It is.
Yeah.
It is definitely.
Just to know that the services that you provided really helped somebody make that change or that shift.
Yeah, there's one particular client that sticks in my mind that I worked with in the store that I've seen over the years, and he continues to work out in the community. He's had the job he's had for years now, quite a few years, probably longer than I've been in supported employment.
Yeah, I mean, it just feels to me like it's a program with so many benefits to lots of different people and places. So it certainly benefits the individual, like we talked about, right?
Oh,
Like,
yes, definitely.
they have that routine of working, something to do, sense of purpose. But there's also the benefit to the employers of, having employees and the community having people working and even potentially, the government people moving off of or getting less benefits because they're moving into the workforce. And
Yeah, and I think, and it affects the families in a
Families,
positive
yeah.
way, friends, significant others. But I would say it even affects the mental health center because very often somebody working is doing better, so they're on the road to recovery,
right,
and they're using less services,
right.
so that the team can then help the people that have more need of services at the time.
Right. Right. It helps people move on that journey of recovery. And
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. I love it. So is that kind of how you envision it really fitting in? Like it's a piece of a person's journey to recovery?
Yeah. I want to say it was Dr. Hafez, who was our chief medical officer and CEO years ago, who used to describe it as a three-legged stool. And support and work was one of those legs that allowed stability.
Right. That a person can really benefit from having that routine. And it's kind of interesting to stop and think about that right now as a lot of people are pulling out of the workforce or making other decisions for themselves. Yet we know it's such a positive benefit for definitely the people we serve. Just kind of interesting.
I think, like I said, we take for granted so many things.
Yeah.
And that includes work.
Yeah, it sure does. It sure does. So tell me something that people don't know about you. What's something that you bring to this job? Like, what's a part of you that's, why is this job such a good fit for you? Why have you been doing this for 23 years?
I guess because, I enjoy helping people. I mean, like most people, I've had my times when I've been, feeling down, and, I look to people for support. So I guess part of it's giving back.
Yeah, and just how it feels to give back too.
Yeah.
It sounds like you kind of light up when you talk
Yeah,
about
and
these
I
clients.
and I think I have the right attitude. I'm very patient,
Not judgmental.
not judgmental.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm able to meet people where they're at.
Yeah. Yeah, because you mentioned earlier, like it doesn't matter how severe someone's mental illness are or how severe their symptoms are.
Right.
If they want to work, you work with them to try to find work.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we have an employment specialist on one of the ACT, well, she does both ACT teams, but we're going to be hiring, hopefully, another ACT supported
So
employment
that's
specialist.
the assertive community treatment team, which is the team for our most severe.
Yeah, and she's had success.
Yeah.
I don't think we can judge people and say, you're not ready to work. If they feel they're ready to work, then we need to find out why and encourage that.
So that's that client choice. It's driven by whether they are ready or they feel ready, and we come alongside them. And also strengths-based. You mentioned that before. We kind of skirted around it, but it also sounds like helping people figure out what would they be good at or what would be a good match, rather than saying, oh, well, you can't do that, you can't do that.
Right. An example I hear at different trainings is, somebody might say they want to be an astronaut. We're not going to say, well, you can't be an astronaut. That's ridiculous. Do you know what it takes to be an astronaut? We'll sit down and go through and figure out what it is about being an astronaut that's interesting to them. And we will look at what it takes to be an astronaut so that they can decide, do they want to go to school and strive for this goal? Whether it's being an astronaut or being a mechanic. We had somebody who recently got a full-time mechanic's job.
That's excellent.
So, the possibilities are endless.
Well, and I love that example because I think there are many people who would jump to that. So, a family member or a friend comes to me and says, I want to be an astronaut. And, my immediate response might be, oh, do you know what that takes? There's no way to do that. But your staff are trained not to say those words.
Exactly.
Your staff are trained to say, what is it about being an astronaut that you're interested in? And, all of those things that you just mentioned.
And that comes from an actual example. One of the trainings, it was somewhere down south. They lived near a facility that that did, it must have been Houston or something, somewhere around there. And they just wanted to work on the facility. They didn't really want to be an astronaut, but they were able to get in there and work around that stuff.
So by not judging, by exploring what was interested, they were able to figure out what was the right match for that person. Yeah. I mean, what a great example and a good reminder for us all about anything that when we're talking to people that, we should inquire and ask questions and figure things out before we make a judgment or try to make a point or try to steer somebody in a certain direction.
Definitely.
Yeah. It's really amazing. So what haven't we talked about about supported employment. Is there anything else about the program that you think people should know about?
Well, I guess we should say it's funded by Medicaid.
It is funded by Medicaid, yep.
We do have folks that have paid out of pocket. There's a sliding scale fee available. So we have had a few folks that wanted the support and have taken advantage of that in that way. Trying to think what else we haven't touched
The
base
other thing
on.
that just popped into my head, because we mentioned the Department of Vocational Rehabilitation, so the state
Yes.
VR. So do we have a relationship with them? What's the difference between supported employment and somebody
VR.
going to VR or vocational
So
rehabilitation?
vocational rehabilitation is federally funded.
Mm-hmm.
It's not Medicaid funded. So if somebody doesn't have Medicaid, they might go to vocational rehabilitation. So in the past, we have been a vendor, what they call a vendor, community resource provider, CRP, for Voc Rehab. And that basically means that when somebody goes to vocational rehabilitation, some of the things they do differently than us is that they require people often to do assessments and take tests to see where their strengths are, whereas we don't require that. It's an option. They require it. But then once they've determined what they want to do, if they want to look for a job, they get to pick a CRP, a community resource provider that they want to work with. So they have the option of choosing us. With a few years back, when vocational rehabilitation was making a lot of changes, we kind of got away from being a CRP. And we're actually in the process of trying to redevelop or develop the internal mechanisms, I guess, for being able to be a CRP again. We actually have a meeting set up in November to meet with the Nashua office,
Oh, great.
which at the moment is located in Manchester. Funny thing. Because of things they had to do, they ended up moving up to the Manchester office, so they share an office with Manchester Vocational Rehabilitation. But they are in the process of coming back to Nashua.
So it sounds like building that relationship could help other people access some of the services that
Yeah.
we have, if we're the right fit for them.
Right, exactly. And in some cases, other CRPs may not be as helpful because different CRPs have different strengths. So, some of them are more about job coaching and job carving, which is kind of making a job that doesn't exist out of something. So you see that a lot with folks with developmental disabilities. So they're not as familiar with working with people with mental illness. So
Right, because vocational rehab works with people with all kinds of disabilities.
Yes, exactly.
And
Deaf,
versus our
blind.
specialty is really working with individuals with mental illness, and
Yeah.
that may be their symptoms of anxiety or psychosis or paranoia or whatever other symptoms
our
somebody might have.
Deaf and Hard of Hearing Services
deaf and-
department
Yeah.
is connected to Voc Rehab as well.
Yeah. Wow. So what I've heard is supported employment's good for lots of different people.
Definitely.
It's got benefits for employers. So, if any employer is interested in learning more, they could certainly reach out to our organization, and it's good for the staff because you've certainly shared your own feeling of just pride and
Yeah, and I see that in the other employment specialists as well. Definitely, they all love their job.
Well, how great it is to just see. Talk about tangible success.
Yeah,
Right? Helping
yeah.
somebody find a job and keep a job. Like you get to just really celebrate those wins.
Yeah, and which sometimes in mental health is hard. You see a lot of crisis, and it's good to see good things happen.
It is good to see good things happen. So I have this question that I like to sort of end with,
Okay.
which is, we're about empowering in the Empower Hour.
Yeah.
So if you had to say what's one thing that empowers you or empowers people to be their best selves, what would you say that is? What's empowering for people?
I think hope and encouragement. So I think having somebody else believe in you is very empowering.
Yeah, and it sounds like that's what you and your staff do. You
Yes.
hope and believe and encourage the clients that if they want a job, you'll help them find it.
Exactly.
Oh, it has been a delight
Oh, thank you.
talking
Thank you
to
for
you
having me.
and learning so much more about the IPS supported employment
Yes.
program. And I'd like to say, even though I know a lot about what goes on at Greater Nashua, it's always good to hear it directly from the folks doing it. And I feel like I've learned some about both you and the program. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Well, thank you so much for watching the Empower Hour with Greater Nashua Mental Health. We hope that you have learned something today and go live empowered.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.